Good morning. Good morning, CMS. Thanks, everybody, for coming this morning. Well, first of all, it is a pleasure today to introduce the 24th Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary Alex Azar. But just a few words before he comes out. So I remember, I think it was late last year, when I was talking to the President, we were at another event, and he said, Seema, have you heard? Do you know Alex Azar? He's from Indiana. And then he goes through and he said, you know, this guy's going to be great. And he goes through and he starts talking about all of Alex's great accomplishments. Alex had been a clerk for Justice Scalia in the United States Supreme Court. He had served as general counsel and as deputy secretary at HHS under President Bush, and how he'd spent the last 10 years prior to returning to HHS as an executive at one of the leading pharmaceutical manufacturers in the world. And so he's going through all of this, and I didn't say this, but what I was thinking was, Mr. President, you had me at Hoosier. He's from Indiana, so hey, you had me there. But, you know, just, you know, from Indiana, and also Alex has a real national reputation for somebody that is intelligent and smart, goal-oriented, vision-oriented. And a lot of people have vision. But one of the things that I've found by working with Alex over the last few months is that he also has an idea and a sense of how to get things done. So it's more than just a vision and goals, but he actually has a deep understanding of a pathway to success. And it's been a real pleasure to work with him. Like I said, he brings a lot of energy, integrity, intelligence, and great ideas. For me personally, it's just been a wonderful experience being able to learn from somebody with that much vision and intelligence and ideas. So I am super excited to be working with him. I'm excited for the journey ahead and being able to implement many of his great ideas and his vision for the agency. So with that, I will introduce to you our 24th Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar.
Hey. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Seema, Administrator Verma, thank you very much. As the Administrator was mentioning, we're both Hoosiers, and it goes even beyond that. Our daughters are the same age, and actually in AP English together, I think, is the class they're in. Our sons are the same age, and we are usually on the same American Airlines flights. So it is, and the Administrator was kind to say my vision. It's not mine. It's her vision. It's the President's vision. It's what we're working on together. I'm just so delighted to be with you all. We've got now, many of us in this room, 17 years of history working together. From my time as General Counsel and then as Deputy Secretary. You just could not be at a more important agency or have a more important role in the life of this country or the healthcare system. And so for me to have the chance to work with all of you in that is really humbling. Just think about it, $1 trillion. I mean, 1/4 of the US government flows through the people in this room and are watching on webcast. That is just an awesome responsibility. The care for 40% of the American people, again, flowing through the people in this room and on this webcast. When we talk about the ability to touch and impact every American every day, whether you're directly providing insurance or coverage for individuals through the work you do, even if you're not directly providing that to them, you're doing it for their grandmother, their grandfather, their parent, their child. So somehow you are in fact touching everyone in this country every day. And you're having a big impact on the system. Our healthcare system in the United States delivers great outcomes. It does incredible things, but it can be so much better. And we know it can be better. And we here at CMS and at HHS can have a huge role in actually driving that change. And that's why I've really carved out 4 areas of focus. These are areas of focus that the President asked me to really spend my time on, and also are areas of personal passion and drive for me. And it doesn't mean that other parts of the department, other programs, we have over 300 programs here at HHS. if everything is great, humming along, and there's not a need for transformational change, well, that's great. We have 80,000 people who are taking care of that. That's great, and I can focus my energies elsewhere. So it's not meant to in any way diminish the importance of the other 300+ programs or activities, but rather to say, hey, in these 4 areas, it really needs the power of the office of the Secretary and of the President to drive the type of transformational change that we need. So those 4 areas, the first one is drug pricing. A very, very difficult challenge that we have, in part because the system works for so many of the players in that system, the different players. They have commercial relationships that have built up over decades, and to get any one company in that system to change the dynamic is really not going to happen, and so those are situations where we in the government can play a very important role in transforming the system. We've done a lot. We've got a lot more coming in that space. The second area is in making insurance more available, more affordable to individuals. We have a vision of people having insurance, of people having access to affordable insurance, of that insurance being offered through the private sector, of empowering states with as much choice and freedom to help customize benefits for individuals as possible. We obviously have a program that we have proposed to Congress in terms of change, but with whatever program we have at any time, we're going to do the best we can with any program we have to deliver for our beneficiaries and the individuals who count on us. And so the administrator and I and the rest of the team have been working on ways that with the authorities that we have, how can we make the individual insurance market, how can we make Medicaid expansion, how can we make Medicaid as individualized, as affordable, as choiceful, and as state-devolved as possible for people. The third area is something that I gave a couple of speeches on about 3 weeks ago, which is a passion of mine that came about from Secretary Leavitt's tenure. Many of you would have been involved in that, which is the value-based transformation of our healthcare system, moving away from our procedure-based way of paying, which we've had really since the early 80s, to paying for health and outcomes. It's going to be a big challenge. I think the work has been going on now for over 12 years, and it's carried on. It's really a bipartisan effort. This is not something that divides Republicans and Democrats, the desire to change how we pay for procedures and pay for drugs in our system. But and I think a lot of foundational work has happened. I really do hope that during our tenure, it will be the hockey stick moment where there's a genuine trend break, where people will look back 10, 15 years from now and say that's when it happened. That's really when the change began to paying for outcomes and value over just paying for procedures. We've got some key drivers, happy to go into that if you'd like, but some key drivers that I think we in the government, because Medicare is the dominant payer in so many parts of the country, if we don't change, the rest of the world, the private sector actually won't change, because they do often free ride off of us. You may not always appreciate how important the work you do is. You may be doing payment rules that are for 40% of the American population, but then when a private sector insurer is working with a hospital system, their contract may simply be, we'll pay 120% of Medicare fee-for-service. I mean, that's how simple some provider and insurer contracts are, meaning what you do has just a funnel impact across the whole system. And so we, again, like I talked on drug pricing, it may be that we have that first mover advantage and the necessity that if we have to change our payment rules, our approach is if we want the rest of the system to be able to change, because no one private actor may be able to actually transform and be a disruptor in the system. We have to be that disruptor ourselves. And then the fourth area is, of course, the opioid crisis. Where it's just destroying our communities. 116 Americans are dying every single day of opioid overdose in this country. We didn't get into this overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. It was really a perfect storm of many, many factors. The government was involved, private sector, the practice of medicine, the drug companies. Just go through the list of entities involved in us getting to this terrible, terrible place we're in, and it's going to take across all of those domains action. President's laid out an agenda, and we continue to work on how we can push that forward to achieve some pretty bold goals that he set out a week ago Monday, that to really, in the next 3 years, I think, bring us to pretty radical change in the profile of the opioid epidemic here in the United States. So those are 4 areas. You probably should have noticed that each of those 4 are ones where CMS has a very, very important central role. Probably not surprising, since you are a $1 trillion organization and 1/4 of the U.S. government. You know, I'm the kind of person, I like to have the football, as you'd say, you know, in sports terminology. You guys have the football, you know, where the money is, the action is, the big programs. So it's very exciting. I hope you're excited and find what you do to be as important as I know it is. It's really vital to the health and well-being of all Americans, and my job is to enable you to do that as best as you can and serve the people that we're entrusted with. So with that said, let me stop and sit with the administrator, and I think we're going to do some questions. Okay?
Well, we had a chance earlier to have the Secretary sit down with some of the CMS leadership team and some of the center directors and also their deputies to talk about some of their strategic priorities. So we had a chance to do that. I don't know if you want to maybe comment on some of the things that we talked about.
Sorry. So let me just say, I have read through the strategic plan, the operational and tactical plan, and we talked at with the leadership group about just even the execution frameworks that you all have. It's really impressive. And there's just, like, the administrator and I are in a mind meld on the direction of everything that you're doing here. I mean, I look through all of the strategic plans that you've got, and it really is what we need to do. It's where we need to drive both CMS as well as the healthcare system in the country. And so that's a really good place to be in, because there are so many organizations. That's what I do, is large organizations. I cannot tell you, even in the private sector, how many large organizations don't know where they're going. They don't know where they don't have the strategy for, we're here and we want to be here within 5 years. You have that. It's a very clear agenda. It's laid out. And even there's a really good tick-tock of what are the steps, the roadmap to get there in each of those areas. So now it's the challenge for CMS, and then for me as secretary working with you all, is how do we get there? It's execution. So operationalizing and executing against a very clear, coherent, and good strategy, that's a great place to be in, because that's what I do. That's what we all do, is moving the freight and executing against that. So you should feel really good about the opportunities.
I think he's talking about the clearance process, right? It's our favorite. All right, so what we did was we put out an all-staff email and asked folks to give us questions for the Secretary. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that we received. The first one is from Catherine Sararama from CCSQ, and she asked, I would like to ask the Secretary, what is your leadership style and what qualities do you look for in the staff? And who comes to HHS to brief you?
And who comes to HHS to brief me? Oh, okay. So on the first part, which is what do I look for, and this is something that's, I guess, evolved as I've learned over decades of now leading large organizations and people management, which really, it's sort of the most important thing that you do as a leader. I was for a decade on the board of the Indianapolis Symphony, and I'd sit there and I'd watch how the symphony functions, and I would think and learn about the different roles of players in the symphony. And as a leader of large organizations, I tend to think of myself as like the conductor up in front of the symphony orchestra. I do not need to be the best violinist, nor am I. I do not need to be the best oboist, nor am I. My job is to hire, promote, equip, train the best violinist, the best oboist, and then get that out of them, bring that out of them so that they can perform at the highest level they possibly can, and then enable all those players on the stage to actually perform music that works, that is in sync and delivers a coherent whole. That's what my wife will often say, how on earth do you sleep at night with a $1.2 trillion agency? I'm sure Sanjay, same thing. And, you know, I actually sleep, the few hours I do, I sleep relatively well because I know what my job is and what it isn't. My job isn't to do your job. We have 80,000 amazing people at this agency, and I don't need to do your job. I just need to help enable this organization organically to do what it can do best and help provide the direction, make that happen. In terms of what I look for then in the leaders and the people that I work with and how I judge them, the first thing is integrity. And that's beyond rule compliance. That is honor. That is a sense of just, would you be proud of your behavior if it's on the front page of the paper? Would you be proud if your family members knew of what you were doing and how you were conducting yourselves? That notion of personal integrity in all that we do. And that's even our just interpersonal interactions, having integrity, transparency, honesty, respect in those kind of, in that way. The second is teamwork. You cannot lead or have an organization that is complex like ours if we do not work well together. We have no soloists here. We have to really work well together, and that means that our interactions have to be transparent. It means that we have to be thinking about more than ourselves or our own function. I like when I'm sitting around the table and people are thinking always about at least the next level up. So instead of sitting there and let's say you're working on Medicaid, sitting in a meeting and only talking about what's good for Medicaid, actually taking the perspective of what's good for CMS as a whole, or what's good for HHS as a whole, or if you're in the cabinet, what's good for the entire U.S. government, even if not necessarily for HHS. That's enterprise level leadership as opposed to parochial leadership. The third area is courage. One of the things that I really love about being able to work with President Trump is that he wants us to do very big and bold things, and a lot of the areas where in the past your sort of more traditional political operators might say, oh, that's untouchable, don't do this, don't do that. Seema and I don't get that kind of guidance. It's do the right thing, solve the big problems, come up with the big solutions, and then execute against them. And by the way, do it yesterday. That's courage, okay? That's real courage. So that means we need people who are willing to demonstrate real courage because come under a lot of fire for doing those things. There's a reason that traditionally the system acts in a more incremental way and not sort of swinging for the fences. It'll take courage for all of us, but it's nice to know when leadership has your back on demonstrating that kind of courage. The fourth area is discipline, and that's discipline in the good sense of the word discipline, not the bad discipline, which is around what I talked about before, execution. It's making the trains run. It's just an organization that hums, that moves things, puts achievements up, delivers against an agenda with just a regularity of a Swiss watch kind of thing. And there's something, I believe in organizations that have highly engaged teams where people are deeply committed to the sense of purpose and mission of the organization and are very engaged around delivering for their customers. Your customers, of course, are beneficiaries and other stakeholders. But what I find makes a team really be engaged is a team of winners. Teams that know they can set out a bold objective and deliver against that and achieve, or sort of be like the Marine Corps. You can take any beach. Given any challenge, you can tackle it, you can achieve it, and having that inner sense of confidence that the job can get done no matter how difficult the task is. And that's that fourth element of discipline, of just knowing you can take on any challenge and achieve it as a team or as an individual. And so building up teams of winners like that is also, and leaders who can do that and teams that have that are very important to me.
Okay. The next question is from James Holt, the regional office in Atlanta, and he asks, how will HHS CMS use innovative solutions to lower drug prices for Medicare Part B as well as other aspects of the Medicare program?
Great. So that first of the four areas that I talked about, which is on drug pricing. So even before I got here, the organization has done a lot on drug pricing. FDA approved more generic drugs last year than ever before in history. You all put out the Part B payment roll on reducing out-of-pocket spend for senior citizens for Part B drugs by $320 million just this year. Million, right? Yeah, million. Sometimes with you all, it's hard. Million, billion, trillion, you know? You have to reframe. So $320 million in just 1 year of out-of-pocket savings from the 340B rule changes for senior citizens. That's huge, okay? Huge changes right there. And then in the president's budget that we put forward, we've got a 5-part plan on how 10 years in, 10 plus years, how do we adapt the Part D drug program to help us create either lower out-of-pocket expenses for senior citizens or create some incentives in the system towards lower or flattening list prices for drugs based on Part D and the impact that it can have on behavior of pharma companies. So a 5-part plan there. Things like pulling forward rebates so that the senior citizen can get the benefit of the rebate discounts, at least a third of that benefit at the point of sale, so that they're not absorbing full cost whenever they're showing up at the pharmacy, but getting that rebate pulled forward. A genuine out-of-pocket cap, so that when you hit catastrophic, instead of the 5% that you have now, having a 0% copay or co-insurance once you hit that catastrophic cap area. Another innovation would be fixing an incentive that's in the system right now, where for the pharmacy benefit manager and the drug company, it almost pays for the list prices to keep increasing so that the beneficiary moves into catastrophic, because the way the reinsurance is done in that catastrophic period, the taxpayers are paying 80% of that cost. The insurance company's only paying 15% and the beneficiary is paying 5%. We want to flip that dynamic around and say the insurance company ought to be paying 80% in that catastrophic, and we, the taxpayers, should pay 20%, and then, of course, have that 0 for the beneficiary, given what we just talked about, meaning you'll have the insurance companies use their power much more to contain list prices and not drive people through the donut hole to get to catastrophic, where we then, the taxpayers, are shouldering 80% of that burden, because they'll be shouldering 80% and have a real incentive to focus not just on net pricing, but that list price and what can they do to contain that. Bunch of other changes in there. And then in Part B, we want to see if we can move some Part B drugs or classes of drugs into Part D, or use the tools of Part D to help us manage Part B spend. You know, we're paying 106%, or depending on the sequester, 104.375 or whatever it is, of ASP. We're not getting any kind of deals for the massive expense of Part B drugs. Can we use, while respecting private markets, fostering innovation, competition, beneficiary choice, can we take the lessons we've had in Part D and use them for some drugs in Part B? So those are a couple of the things that we have going. We have a whole suite of other plans that we're going to be rolling out within the next month or so, as the president previewed up when we were in Manchester, New Hampshire last week. So we're working on that, and that should be coming out quite soon. So, and that's not going to be a one and done. This is a massive transformational effort of a massive part of the healthcare channel and industry, and it'll be an ongoing effort and focus of attention for us.
So we got a lot of questions about Reimagine HHS, and people wanted to know, is that a downsizing effort, and where does it stand today?
So first on Reimagine, I just do want to make it very clear that the intention of Reimagine HHS is not about downsizing. It's about how do we just bring more modern management and effectiveness tools and organize ourselves well to deliver for our beneficiaries. So it's really driven by career leaders and others. It's more of an organization up approach, not a top down of here's what we have to achieve, but rather you all run these programs. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you do differently? How would you organize things differently? How would you operate differently? What frustrates you about your job? What do you go home at night and over dinner say to your family, oh my gosh, this is crazy that we do things that way? Put that on the table. Reimagine HHS is really about empowering that kind of thinking and then driving change against that. I'll give you an example. So for instance, NIH. Okay, every dollar that we spend on administrative process at HHS is a dollar we are not investing out there in a clinical trial, okay, or in research. Same here. Every dollar that we spend on, say, an IT system that maybe could be more efficient and faster. That when we waste money by not being as effective on an IT system, if we had a better upgraded one, that dollar could be spent paying for somebody's health care, okay? That through our program. So that's what it's about. It's really just unleashing the creativity. How do we organize ourselves? How do we operate in ways that are efficient, effective, and help us deliver for the end consumer of all of our programs?
I've got a question. This one comes from me. So look back at your career, and you've had an excellent career. You've done a lot of wonderful things. I think that we are very fortunate to have you here. But what brings you back to public service?
That was probably the easiest thing of all. I loved my time at HHS as general counsel and deputy secretary. I mentioned engagement earlier. For me, engagement is about having an important role on something that's important. And I think that's what gets you up in the morning, that sense of purpose, of mission. You know, anybody can be compliant. Anyone can go and work 9 to 5. But what gets you working 8 to 8 is when you get up out of bed and you say, what I do matters. It's very important, and I have an important role in delivering against that. And so if I don't work on this, if I don't spend time on this, that mission won't get accomplished. I'm a very purpose-driven person. I don't think that there is a more important purpose than what we do here at HHS across all of our programs. So for me, the chance to have an important role on something that important, how could I possibly resist? It's just a delight to be back with so many of the people that I've worked for decades with. I feel a little bit like Rip Van Winkle, who I had a 10-year nap. I woke up again. It's many of the same issues that were there 10 years ago that we're still wrestling with. I do occasionally, I get off of the elevator there on the 6th floor in the Humphrey building, and my brain is still very programmed to turn to the right to go to the deputy secretary's suite, and I occasionally have to correct myself and turn left, and then I'll be sitting at my desk, and I keep waiting for Secretary Levitt to come in and say, "What are you doing in my office? Yours is down there." But it's the privilege of a lifetime. It's the job of a lifetime to be here leading this great organization, great people, important programs, and I think we're going to achieve some really, really big things together. So that's why.
Well, I've heard that the Secretary has been visiting all of the different agencies within HHS. You've been to NIH and FDA, and we heard that there's been some gift giving. So we didn't want to be outdone at CMS because we are the 90-pound gorilla in HHS.
Are you going to give me $1 trillion?
That's right. And before we came here, we had the Secretary tour the little museum on the 2nd floor, and he got to see the very first Medicare card. And so we wanted to present the Secretary with his very own Medicare health insurance card. This is a preview of the new card that's going to be coming out in April. And I don't want the program integrity people to get all excited because it doesn't actually start until a little bit later. We won't call out his age here, but
does it have the,
it doesn't. Yeah, I think coverage starts on
15 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, this is what our new card looks like. So we wanted him to have that.
Thank you very much.
And
there we go. And wonderfully, it does not have a Social Security number on it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we also heard, so at FDA, I think we heard that he got a lab coat, and at NIH, he got some scrubs. So we thought that we would complete the outfit with a CMS hat here.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully you'll put it all together at some point, and we can take a picture. So. Thank you again for coming today, and appreciate all of you coming out today, and we look forward to working with you, Mr. Secretary, so thank you.
Thank you all.
Don't forget, please remain seated. Please remain seated. Thank you.